All right. Yes. Good morning, everyone. I'm Don Zavis, National Sales Trainer and Sales Coach. I want to welcome you to our Friday session where I am on the stage alone. I'm not even in front of my obligatory whiteboard, and it's been a day of challenges. We had some hiccups with our lighting, so you may see some different shadows and some different lighting. We had to redo that. Spilled coffee all over my arm, which, by the way, hopefully isn't too obvious there for those that are joining us. And Mr. Wechter will not be joining us as well. He's actually having some contracting work done at his home because of all the money he's making being an amazing sales trainer, and he wants to be there to supervise it. So today you have little old me. This is like the old days. When I first started doing this, literally in 2005, that was it. It was just me with nothing. So this makes me feel young again. So today's going to be a great session. I'm going to continue what we've been talking about in the past, which in starting our session. So as always, for those that are joining us, thank you so very much. I realize there are many things that are vying for your time today in this, continuing post-pandemic world. Although apparently there's still some new variants that are popping up out there that's like whack-a-mole. They pop up and we knock them down. But the world has become a really, really different place. I mean, here we are. It's April 1st, right? I was talking to Simona before we got started, and she goes, is this an April Fool's joke? I happened to say something, and I was like, no, I didn't even realize it. So just be careful. There are many pranksters in the world that may come across your path. But these are not April Fool's jokes. These are deadly serious. Obviously, there's unrest in Europe with the war in Ukraine. There is ever higher gas prices. Just when you thought they're as high as they could possibly go, they go up again. We've got the highest inflation we've had continuing. There's a lot of things that are out there vying for the world. But we as salespeople, unfortunately, we are still looked upon to do our jobs, right? Despite the uncertainty, despite the cost, despite everything. I have yet to have one client tell me, well, listen, we're going to reduce the quotas for our salespeople because of all the problems in the world. I've not had that conversation one time. So we as salespeople are still expected to perform. So I've picked a session today which talks about incumbents, because one of the things we've talked about in the past, and I believe will continue, certainly into 2022 and likely into 2023. And we talked about this literally in the 10 ways to survive the pandemic. You may have to do twice as much to get the same results that you were getting previous to that. So let me give you the illustration. So for example, if you were making 20 prospecting calls, you might have to get 40. If you were spending $1,000 on advertising, you might have to invest $2,000. If you were doing one social media post a day, you may have to do 2. You may have to do twice as much in today's world to get the same results that you did before. Now, if you choose not to, which is great to have choices, don't be surprised if you struggle. You look at a lot of the businesses that are out there that are posting significantly reduced numbers. And a lot of those really are due to the fact that their outreach, their prospecting, their efforts aren't as robust as they need to be. I've often said in the best of times, you should be prospecting 50% of your time, 50%. So that means on a conventional 40-hour week, not that you work a conventional 40-hour week, but in a conventional 40-hour week, you're going to be prospecting 20% of that time, or excuse me, 50% of the time, 20 hours. 20 hours. Even if you look at it on a daily basis, you're looking at 4 hours a day, just prospecting, cold calls, knocking on doors, going to networking groups, going to affinity events, being out in the world. Right? Doing all the things that we need to do to be visible. And yet I will tell you, most people do a fraction of that, and unfortunately many do none of that. So clearly we're in a situation that's most challenging, and I'm going to, again, strongly encourage you to do that, despite the fact that, again, gas is at an all-time high. One of the things about being a shoe leather salesperson, and I profess very strongly the idea of see the people, be out in the world. There's a great line that we use. If you're taking notes, write this down. If you're sitting across the desk from someone who won't write you a check or can't write you a check, don't be there. Which means get out of your home office. If you're a salesperson, get out of your office. 10 o'clock on a Tuesday afternoon is not the time to schedule meetings. Be out in the world. Every dollar that you've ever gotten or every dollar that your company has ever gotten came from somebody else, came from someone else. Now, the nice thing about it is those someone else's, they show up every day, right? They're outside. You don't even have to invite them. They just show up. Be out in the world, but understand, you will likely have to work twice as hard to potentially get the same results you did previously because of all the pressures in the world. The one final thing I want to talk about in the sales current events is a lot of the dumpster fire, which is politics, and I strive not to make this ever a political platform. But I have watched so many people get twisted up into the politics of business, and I don't like this company, and I don't like their politics and things like that. You know what? I'm not like that. I like a dollar bill. I believe that dollar bill doesn't have any politics to it. I believe it only gets politics when I start applying it to it. Right? So it's great to have choices. You get to have yours. But I would strongly, strongly profess the idea that, don't make your world a political one, especially not when you're in sales. So let's talk about incumbents. Now, one of the things that we talk about in one of our training sessions is that most people have an incumbent of some kind, right? Now, if you don't know what an incumbent is, it's the person or circumstance or situation that your prospect is working with already. Now, I will, for depending on your circumstances, most people prefer to do business with people that likely already have an incumbent. So, for example, if you were a financial planner, you may want to only deal with people that have a net worth of $1 million or more. Right? And again, you can have choices. But say, for example, for our illustration, you're a financial planner and you only want to work with people that have $1 million or more. Now, there's a very good chance that that person that has the $1 million probably has an existing relationship. They probably have that money already with someone. Maybe they've been with them for a long time. Maybe they're even happy with them, right? Maybe they feel they're getting good service and the pricing and the good coverage and everything that needs to take place. But most of us prefer to do business with people that are elevated enough up in our profession that they likely have an incumbent. So that's the one end of the scale, right? So, for example, if you sell cars, it's generally easier to sell a car to a person that owns a car than it is to sell a car to a person that doesn't own a car. Why? Well, because they've never had a car up to this point in time, and apparently, at least in their eyes, they're fine. Now you need to sell them on the idea that one more day without a car is unnecessary or unwarranted or certainly undesirable. But a person who's always had a car, getting another car is a foregone conclusion. They can't see their life without an automobile being involved. So let's talk a little bit about the ways incumbents go. The other issue, and as we look across the abstract, so most of us prefer to do business. I prefer to do business with people that have done business with other keynote speakers in the past, other trainers in the past, other coaches in the past. Why? Because I don't have to re-educate them on what that relationship looks like. They understand how to work with a keynote speaker. They understand how to work with a trainer or coach. They understand how to work with someone who's in an educational or mentoring setting. I don't have to reinvent that wheel. They already know it. But are there people who don't know it? Absolutely. I deal with people all the time that have never worked with a keynote speaker. They've never worked with a trainer. They've never worked with a coach. And part of what we need to do is educate them and acclimate them to what that process actually looks like, because in many cases, they don't know. They don't know what they don't know. So the two ends of the spectrum are, A, someone who is already working in the industry that you have, right, may have been there a long time, might be quite mature in that industry. Other times you're going to deal with people right in the beginning. But even the people in the beginning have an incumbent. And that's what many salespeople don't understand. And many times the incumbent is doing nothing. I'll say that again. Many times the incumbent is doing nothing. So for example, if you're that financial planner that we talked about, although yes, you would like people that have in excess of $1 million, is it possible that somebody may have $1 million and not be working with a financial planner? Absolutely. Maybe they're a day trader. Maybe their $1 million is in that 401k at work and they have really no active involvement with it. And now they're getting to the point where they're going to retire. And they've lived very comfortably without a financial planner up to this point in time. Their incumbent is no one. Many people that I talk to have never worked with a sales trainer before. Their incumbent is no one. So when you think of an incumbent relationship, there are ones that, again, are very aware of what you do, how you do it. They understand what your process is. And on the other hand, an incumbent is doing nothing. Maybe they've never bought a car before, right? Maybe they've never worked out of their house before. They've never worked with a financial planner. They've never eaten at this restaurant. And yet, they feel that their life is total, complete, and fulfilled. They don't know what they don't know. Now, I'm not saying they're wrong, but I'm saying that in the world of professional training and coaching, understanding the influence of an incumbent is absolutely critical, because as we talk about in our closing process, that incumbent is going to be very, very influential in closing your selling situation. That incumbent is going to have a profound role in playing whatever that is. And again, the incumbent could potentially be no one or nothing. That incumbent could be nothing, right? They've never used it before. They've never had that relationship. Hey, JD, good, you saved me from having to call you this morning. So that incumbent could be something that they've done themselves. So for example, again, I don't want to beat the dead horse, but it is pivotal you understand this. The incumbent could be nothing. Maybe, JD just walked in the room from Roofs Are Hot, so thank you. And it's interesting because many people consider themselves, especially nowadays, kind of the big DIY trend, do it yourself, right? You go to Home Depot and there's videos and there's equipment. And maybe you have a leak in your roof. And maybe every other leak you've ever had in your roof, you figured you go up in the attic yourself and try to patch it up, and maybe you did an okay job, maybe not. So your incumbent in this situation is you. You're the incumbent. You're the person that has fixed the issue, the crack in the wall, the burned out spot, the dead spot on your lawn. You are the incumbent. Now, if you're going to get a professional landscaper, a professional roofer, professional remodeler, you have to mentally divorce that incumbent, which could potentially be you. If you're taking notes, write this down. Before they can marry us, they have to divorce whatever they have existing. So before they can marry us, they have to divorce whatever it is their existing process, whatever it is their existing incumbent is. Because we can go in there and tell them how great we are and how wonderful we are and how everything we do is so spectacular. But the reality is, unless they mentally divorce whatever it is that they have right now, there's a very good chance that all of our efforts, all of our talking, everything that we're doing is going to fall on deaf ears. Why? Because they're happy where they are. So if we're going to unseat an incumbent, there's probably a pretty good chance that we're going to have to figure out a way, although mentally, to drive a wedge between their existing relationship and the relationship we'd like them to move to, which is us. All right, so let's talk about the incumbents. I want you to write this down. Consistent or inconsistent. There are two kinds of incumbent categories. There is a consistent incumbent in category, and there is an inconsistent incumbent category. Let me give you examples of both. Your dentist would be considered a consistent incumbent. Now, are you obligated to go to the same dentist time after time after time? No, of course not. You could go to any dentist you want because the dentist looks at you based on where you are now, not based on where you were 2 years ago, 5 years ago, 10 years ago. But historically, people continue to go back to the same dentist. In their mind, because they have a track record of working with that dentist, they will get better service than a person brand new to the case. Although your situation may have changed significantly the last time that you were seen. You're essentially presenting. So consistent versus inconsistent. So your incumbent base is a consistent incumbent, or what we call an inconsistent incumbent. Your real estate agent would fall into the inconsistent incumbent category. Because generally when you buy a house, until you either buy or sell your house, that person is likely not on the scene again. Maybe if you give them a referral or they come across or you see each other at a party or something. But historically, they fall into the inconsistent incumbent category. You worked with them in the past, but that's no guarantee, even though they gave you wonderful service, that you will ever use them again. I have a client that's a carpet cleaner. And the number one thing with carpet cleaning is that they fall into that inconsistent incumbent category. Why? You get your carpet cleaned, they did a wonderful job, you got a wonderful price, you're very happy with them. When you go to get your carpet cleaned again, the process generally isn't, you know what, our carpet's dirty, call XYZ Carpet again. Historically, the process is you open your Valpak, you see a little coupon in there that says 3 rooms of carpet for $99, and you say, hey, honey, I got a coupon here for 3 rooms of carpet for $99. You know, what do you think about getting the carpet cleaned? She says, great, leave it on the counter, I'll call them tomorrow. Even though the first person that did your carpet cleaning did a wonderful job at a wonderful price. So the first thing is categorization. Consistent incumbent or inconsistent incumbent. Now, obviously, you're going to want to be that consistent incumbent. You're going to want to have that top-of-mind awareness. You're going to want to make sure they constantly realize you're bringing value to the relationship. This is not a one and done. And even the times when, historically, we've completed whatever our problem is, whatever our issue is, doesn't mean that we've completed our influence with the client. So consistent versus inconsistent, that's number one. Number two, we talked about the idea of trying to, and I hate to use this word because it has such a negative connotation, driving a wedge between the existing relationship they have and the new relationship you hope to replace it, which is likely going to be us. And in many cases, I will talk to a prospective client, and they will be happy with the relationship they have. They'd be happy. Well, if you remember our closing session, we talk about the idea that if you want to sell aspirin, the first thing you want to do is create a headache. You've got to give them a reason to believe that the circumstance they have is in fact not as good as they may believe at this point in time. It is our responsibility as salespeople to take a person that was having a good day, and I need to make them sick. I need to turn them critical, and then I need to fix them. So I'm going to take that person that has a wonderful relationship and is quite happy with the relationship they have, and now I need to figure out a way where I can create that level of dissatisfaction again. Why? Because before they can marry us, they have to divorce whatever they have right now. And again, that incumbent could be nothing. It could be nothing. The term that I love to use is called nobody's perfect. So if you're writing these down, I would like you to write these words down. Nobody's perfect. That's the name of this particular technique. And it's a very simple process because what it does is it points to the idea that there are other options for those people that are aware of them. Let me give you an illustrative example before we work into this technique. I talk to people all the time, and I will ask them, do you have a doctor that you like? And they say yes. I said, probably been going to him for a long time. And they say, yeah, right? Probably happy with him. He's probably a good guy or a good woman. And they say, absolutely. I said, your doctor tells you you're going to die in 2 months. What are you going to do? Are you going to go home and say, honey, that's it. I got 60 days and I'm dead. Doc Jones said it. I believe him. That's it. What are you going to do? Well, the rational person would do what? Get a second opinion. Why? I'm not saying Dr. Jones is wrong. He might be completely right. But are you going to assume that one fallible human being and put that much credence on what he says? No. Even though you like him and you trust him and you've been going to him for a long time, 90% plus when I ask that question, all say the same thing. You get a second opinion. Why? Because he could be wrong. He's a human being. We are fallible. He could be wrong. Now think about that. Same situation that we're talking about in our application. This fallible human being, regardless of who they are, what industry they're in, could be a lawyer, could be an architect, could be a CPA, could be a painter, could be, it doesn't make any difference. Anything done by a human being is fallible, right? Nobody walks on water. You know, the last one that did got crucified 2,000 plus years ago. We are fallible human beings. So I love the idea of nobody's perfect because what it does is it uses that as an illustrative tool. And I would say, Mrs. Jones, nobody's perfect. I'm not perfect. You're not perfect. If there was one thing that XYZ company could be doing better for you, what would that be? Now keep in mind, out of role play, I have just talked to Mrs. Jones, and Mrs. Jones has just said she was happy with whatever this is. I'm happy with my auto insurance. I'm happy with my life, I'm happy with my financial plan, or I'm happy with, I'm happy with this. And I'm going to say, softening statement, you know what, Mrs. Jones, that's not unusual. Most of the clients that I deal with come to me even though they were happy with whatever the relationship they originally had. So the question is whether or not what I represent is actually improvement for you. But can I ask you a question? Again, softening statement. You're always asking for permission. Nobody's perfect. I'm not perfect. You're not perfect. XYZ company is not perfect. If there was one thing they could be doing better for you, what would that be? And shut up. Now, by the way, I'm saying it very staccato for our illustration. I would say it very communicatively, right? Very just kind of a talkative flow in the conversation. But essentially the idea is that if XYZ company could be doing something better for you, what would that be? Now, here's the interesting thing, and I've said this 1,000 times. Mrs. Jones, who just told you she was happy, will now tell you something. So I'll just use a simple illustration. Well, I wish they would respond to my calls faster. Now, Mrs. Jones, who has just said she was happy, when I asked her, Mrs. Jones, nobody's perfect. I'm not perfect. You're not perfect. XYZ company's not perfect either. If there was one thing that they could be doing better for you, what would that be? And now Mrs. Jones, again, who just said that she was happy, now says, well, I wish they could do this, or I wish they offered this. Now, every weak salesperson, upon hearing that, will immediately jump on it. So if Mrs. Jones said, well, I wish they called me back faster, what would a weak salesperson say? Oh, my God, Mrs. Jones, if we work together, I'll call you. In fact, you know what? We hire psychics. We have psychics in our back room, and every day they come in, they give us a list of people who are going to be thinking about us in an hour. So you don't even have to call us. We'll call you saying, you're going to be thinking about us at 10:30. No, of course not. I don't know the depth of the dissatisfaction of the fact that they don't call them back fast enough. I need to determine the depth of the dissatisfaction. So I'm going to say, Mrs. Jones, thank you for sharing that with me, right? It's always sharing. So when you called XYZ company and you told them that you weren't happy with the speed of their response, what did they say? What did they say? Again, I'm not saying I'm the solution. All I'm saying is you said you wish XYZ company would call you back faster. Now, I, as a professional salesperson, have to identify the depth of that dissatisfaction. And I'm going to say, so Mrs. Jones, when you called XYZ company and said you were unhappy with the response time, what did they say? Now, in Mrs. Jones, she could only do one of two things, right? Number one, she didn't call them. Right? So Mrs. Jones, what did they say? And Mrs. Jones said, I didn't call him. So I'm going to say, okay, well, then it's really not that big of a deal, right? It might be kind of a nuisance, but you're not going to leave them, right? You said you've been with them for 10 years. You're not going to stop working with them because of that. Stop talking. Let her answer. Or Mrs. Jones could have said, well, yes, I called him, and I told him I was unhappy with the response time. I'm going to say, okay, has it gotten better? And to that question, has it gotten better after you told them? Mrs. Jones can only answer one of two things. She can answer yes, or she can answer no. So let's stay with the yes. So I told them I wanted faster response time. Great. Are they responding to you quicker? Yes. Okay. Now I know in the back of my mind there's no trail, there's no pot of gold at the end of this rainbow, right? Great. I'm going to go for something else. Well, if they took care of that, is there anything else that they're doing that you don't like? Or Mrs. Jones could have said, no, they haven't gotten better. To which I'm going to say, well, do you plan on continuing working with them? That's it. Again, she has to mentally divorce that existing relationship before she's ever going to be able to marry me. I can't swoon her. I can't deluge her with all the reasons that she should do business with us. No. All that we can do is identify the level of dissatisfaction. So nobody's perfect. So Mrs. Jones, I'm not perfect. You're not perfect. If there was one thing better that XYZ could be doing for you, what would that be? And she will tell you. She will tell you. And then you go into it. So, Mrs. Jones, when you told XYZ company you weren't happy with the response time you were getting, what did they say? Well, they said they would try to be better. Okay, are they? Of which Mrs. Jones can only say one of two things. Yes, they are, or no, they're not. And that's why professional selling is such an amazing thing, because I know the script. I know the entire script. I fashion the questions in such a way where, regardless of the response, I already know the best way to attend to this. Another thing I like to ask all the time, and this next question is predicated on the idea, and I would like you to write this down. It is their God-given gift and God-given right to be stupid. And I know that's so hard for some salespeople, right? Because they go and they put together this whole detailed plan, and they work it out, and they work out the numbers, and they work out the time frame, and they put it all together. And on paper, it makes nothing but sense. Paper makes nothing but sense. And yet they don't do it. You know, think about all the things that people do in the world that are just stupid. And by the way, I'm equally as guilty. All right? I'm not preaching to the choir. I'm right in there with the sinners. Right? People know drinking is bad. I don't think anybody out there is going to go, oh, no, drinking is good for you. Right? I saw a thing, by the way, that says a shot of bourbon every day is good for you. That's the one I go to. Right? Right? But I also saw another one that said a shot of bourbon was bad for you. So go figure. It's your God-given right to be stupid. I think everybody knows smoking is bad. I like cigars. The people that smoke, when they look at the side of the package, right? Back in the 60s, it said hazardous to your health, right? I stopped smoking 32 years ago, cigarettes, when our daughter was born. But I still occasionally like cigars. But if you looked on the package back in the 60s, the package of cigarettes said, cigarette smoking may be hazardous to your health. Now if you read the sign on the package, and by the way, that's to exonerate the cigarette companies. That's for their benefit, not for yours. For your benefit. It basically says a version of you smoke, you die. Now think about that. Here's a retailer that puts something on their product that says, if you use my product, you die, and yet smoking is actually on the rise. Drinking is on the rise. Right? Obesity, heart problems, all correctable. Too much sugar in the diet, diabetes. You look at all the things that are out there, all of which are correctable. Every single one of them is correctable. And by the way, it doesn't cost you, in most cases, any money to correct them. Exercise. They said a 30-minute brisk walk 3 or 4 times a week, it will add, I don't remember, I read the study, like 5 years to your life. 30-minute brisk walk 3 or 4 times a week. Now think about that. Sean Knott, my trainer back in Michigan, and I've said this so many times. He says, Don, you know what you need to exercise? The ground. As long as you have the ground, you can exercise. You don't need weights. You don't need Nautilus. You don't need, giant health clubs. You need the ground. And wherever you have the ground, you can exercise. And the ground exercises, statistically, are still the better of the exercises. So when I'm talking to somebody, again, before they can marry me, they've got to divorce whatever their existing situation is. So I'm going to say, are you 120% convinced that the people that you're working with are doing everything they can to, and then fill in the blank? Are they doing everything, 120% convinced that they're doing everything they can to save you money, make it faster, make it slower, whatever it is? Are you 120% convinced that they're doing whatever it is that you need them to do? Now, the interesting thing about that is most people, come on in.
Hey, I didn't know you was having a session.
No, that's okay, that's okay.
You doing a sales class?
I am. I'm a sales trainer and sales coach.
Yeah, okay.
Good, welcome.
I was just coming to show what we did, but you haven't.
Oh, well, you can show him Don Zavis waving to him as well.
All right.
Thanks a lot, buddy.
Don, the sales guy?
Yep.
Thanks,
See?
buddy.
No problem. So the idea ultimately is that when you're dealing in this incumbent situation, I need to make sure that they understand that are you 120% satisfied or 150 or 200? You get to pick whatever you want. Are you 125% satisfied, which means you're over full, that when these people go to work every day, they're doing everything they can to do whatever it is for you. Now, the interesting thing about it is we know statistically that's not true. That's not true. They may say that, but statistically it's not true. And when I ask that question, are you 120% satisfied? The vast majority of people say, well, no, I don't think they do. Okay. And again, I'm not telling them I will. I'm not telling them anything like that. All I'm saying is that if you're not convinced, I'm not convinced. Are you 120% convinced that blah, 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 blah? Interestingly enough, most people say no. I'll give you another one. When you're talking to someone that has an incumbent, most incumbents do a very, very poor job of keeping up with their clients, right? Everyone works hard to get the customer. But once they get the customer, then they virtually neglect them. I do entire sessions that we talk about the inverted triangles and how to not neglect a person. In fact, I believe that once they become a customer, that there's no amount of attention that's too much to flow upon them. You can't do enough nice things. You can't be helpful enough. You can't talk to them enough. You cannot do enough to shower love on the clients that have graced you and honored you with their business and their money. I don't believe that you can do enough. And yet I know, again, and the evidence is irrefutable, most people, when they get a customer, they neglect them. One of the tools that I love to use is if I'm talking to someone or I'm working with that financial planner. That's a good one to work with. So I'm working with this financial planner. And I'm going to ask that financial planner, when they're talking to that incumbent that has that $1 million that they would like to get shifted over to them, to say these words. So when you meet with your existing financial planner for your quarterly meeting, what do you guys talk about? And stop talking. Here's what's going to happen literally 100% of the time. Well, we don't meet for a quarterly meeting. Oh, okay. Well, when you meet for your twice annual meeting, what do you guys talk about? Well, we don't meet twice annually. So when you meet for your annual meeting, what do you guys talk about? And here's what I have heard more times than I can remember. We don't meet every year. Now, by the way, you'll notice I didn't say you were going to meet with me quarterly, biannually, or annually. All I said is, so when you meet for your quarterly meeting, what do you talk about? And in the mind of your prospect, what are they thinking when I say, when you meet for your quarterly meeting? What in the mind of your prospect are they likely thinking? Well, how come I'm not meeting for a quarterly meeting? Apparently, the whole rest of the financial world meets with their clients for a quarterly meeting. Why isn't my guy meeting with me for a quarterly meeting? Level of dissatisfaction. I've got to get them to divorce the people that they're dealing with, at least mentally, before they can marry me. So when I say that, so when you meet with your existing financial planner for your quarterly meeting, what do you guys talk about? And she's going to say, well, we don't meet quarterly. And I'd say, really? Biannually? Well, no, we don't meet biannually. Yearly? And at all? Ever? You guys don't meet ever? Because I want to implant that seed that professional financial planners meet all the time with their clients. Again, I need to be able to create that wedge. I need to create that level of dissatisfaction. And now I've implanted in that person's mind that every other professional financial planner meets quarterly. How come my guy's not? It doesn't take much. It doesn't take much. It also gives you an opportunity to be an issue. The other thing that I always need to know is what's important to these people. What's important to them? Because here's what I know. There's a lot of people that boast about stuff nobody cares about. Right? You look at their website. You know, we've been in business for 25 years. And we haven't had an original idea in 24 of them. Some people like cutting-edge companies. Some people want you to be around for a long time. But let me give you an example. What's a better company? The 3-year-old computer company or the 30-year-old computer company? What do you think? Considering the technology 30 years ago isn't even relevant right now. It's quite possible the 3-year-old computer company and the 30-year-old computer company are about the same in their technological acumen. But you won't know that in case you ask. Some companies say, we've got 50 trucks. And they say that very boastfully. The problem being is for the company that has 60 trucks, now they've created the perception that the amount of trucks is indicative of the value of the company. So when I'm boasting at 50 trucks, now the person that has 60 trucks. When I'm boasting that I have 100 employees, well, now compared to the company that has 200 employees, I look half as good. Be very careful. It's only important what's important to them. So, Mrs. Jones, I know you've been working with XYZ company for a long time. And by the way, I got to tell you, they're well respected. They're well known in the marketplace. You know, the things that I've heard about them are good. Out of role play. You never say anything disparaging about your competitors. Because if you say something disparaging about your competitors, you're essentially slapping your prospect in the face for making a poor decision to do business with them to start with. So if they say we work with XYZ company, say, oh my God, XYZ company sucks. Here's what they hear. You're the stupidest person in the world for trying to work with XYZ company. No, I won't lie. I won't lie, I will not cheat, and I will not steal. I believe I'm a man of character and ethics, and I can be rich beyond my wildest dreams and hold all those things in high regard. But I will tell you, in 2022, it's unlikely that any really, really, really bad companies can continue to exist. The marketplace has this economic Darwinism where the really, really bad people, because of bad Yelp reviews or poor customer service or the pandemic killed them or whatever it is, nowadays, the companies that survive have got to be at least reasonably good. So when I say, you know, Mrs. Jones, XYZ company, you know, they're well respected in the market, out of role play. Now, why? Because I'm an industry expert, so I not only know about my company, but I know about all my competitors as well, because I'm an industry expert, back in the role play. So Mrs. Jones, you know, XYZ company, they're very well respected in the marketplace. They really do a great job from what I hear, and I've not worked with them, but I've had people that have had, and they've had some very, very positive things that they were talking about. You know, how are you hoping I can help you? Because again, if they're coming to you after telling you they've had a long-standing relationship with other people, I kind of want to know why I'm there. Say, for example, if they've already got 3 bids from 3 other people, and all of those bids were from legitimate companies, and because they're legitimate and we're legitimate, we're likely going to be in about the same place they are financially, right? Rarely do you find 4 legitimate companies. 3 are at A, and you know, the 4th one is half A. That doesn't happen. Legitimate companies are all around the same price, right? Look at airlines. Airline fees for seats are all relatively close, within maybe 5 or 10%, depending on the circumstances. So I want to make sure that if there's an issue, if there's a problem, you know, years of experience might be important, they might not be, right? I've talked to companies in many cases, they said, you know, we've got 30 years experience, and I said, no, you don't. You have 1 year experience 30 times over. You talk about the computer companies, right? When I was in college for my week and a half, right, back in 1980, for my week and a half in college, I was in a business computer program course for my week and a half. We used cards, punch cards, with Cobalt and Fortran. And you would put your instructions on these punch cards, and you would put it into a computer that was the size of this auditorium, that doesn't have the computing power of my iPhone. Now think about that. If I had 30 years experience, my first 5 were technologies that don't even exist. Look at all the things that are out there now. So the 3-year computer company or the 30-year computer company, they're probably about the same, but it's only important if the client thinks it's important. It's only important if the client thinks it's important. I love to position myself, and write this down. I call it Plan B, Option 2. So Plan B or Option 2. Because when people do things, rightly or wrong, maybe a second opinion, if you want to use that. I love that. I even go so far as to tell people, listen, right, I work with a lot of remodelers. And it's interesting in the remodeling world, even in 2022, because now the prices are going up for everybody, and everything is so volatile, and labor's hard to find, and products consistency is hard to find. But here's what I will tell people, especially when they decide to do business with a remodeler that's significantly less than my client's price. Because we all share the same problems, right? We all share the same labor issues. They all share the same product issues and materials issues and price increases and gas increases. So if somebody's going to do something for half the amount than my client is going to do, you would think that would set up a red flag, right? They're going to charge $100,000. This other person comes in and says, we'll do it for $50,000. Now, what does the consumer think? Oh, my God, I'm getting this great deal. Oh, my God, you know, this other guy was going to rip me off. And all those other quotes that we got for $100,000, well, they're all cheaters too. All those guys are all cheaters. The only honest guy is the guy that's going to do it for half as much. Great to have choices. But now, because most of what you do in a remodeling or a construction facility is concealed. It's concealed. If you think about it, when you build something, what do you as the consumer see? The outside and the inside. That's it. You see the outside and the inside. And you don't even see all of it, by the way. What you see is whatever the covering is on the outside. So if the covering is brick, you see the brick. Right? If it's drywall on the inside, you see the inside. The vast majority of a construction project is concealed. And if I've just charged somebody half as much for the job, where do you think I'm going to try to bring up my profitability? In the things you see or the things you don't see? I don't think that takes a genius. So I'm going to encourage everyone who's out there to be that Plan B, to be that Option 2. I would say, Mrs. Jones, if you elect to go with this company for $50,000, again, most of what happens in construction is concealed. I'm going to strongly encourage you to hire. I suggest one of the other people that gave you the quote, to kind of be your eyes and ears, to make sure they are building it the way that you want it built. Why? Because Plan Bs and Option 2s and all these things are very prevalent in the industry. They give us the opportunity to stay into a sale that historically we thought we lost. Again, go back to the construction. I'm going to make up my money where it's concealed, where you don't see it. So is 16-inch on center studs? Well, I'll push it to 17. Right? Maybe the inspector will let it go. Or maybe I'll do a little bit of this, and maybe I'll do a little bit of this, and maybe the paint that I'm going to use, maybe it's going to be watered down a little bit, and maybe I'm not going to use as much glue as I need to. Nobody ever knows those things. And yet you as the consumer, you ultimately are the one that bears the cost of lack of quality workmanship. Plan B, Option 2s. Those are all big deals for you, second opinions. If you're not taking advantage of them, I want you to do that. Again, before they can marry us, they have to psychologically decide that whatever that existing incumbent is, they can no longer do. And again, the incumbent could be doing nothing. Doing nothing. How many people, again, all the time, the incumbent is doing nothing. They never had a person do that. They never hired a landscaper. They always did it themselves. They never hired a painter. They always did it themselves. Even if they did a very poor job, didn't make any difference. They always did it themselves. So the incumbent in that painting situation is themselves. They are the incumbent. Now they have to sell themselves out of the idea of staying with the incumbent, which is also them, and now going to somebody that they actually have to pay to do this. You can see the convoluted nature. We also talked about, I want to make sure we stay on everything. When people are concerned, and we do an entire session about how people will come to you. Most people buy emotionally. They'll justify it intellectually, but they'll buy emotionally. So normally the conversation that you're going to have when you're talking to a new person is likely going to be an intellectual conversation. They're going to use words like thinking about, exploring, looking into, researching. These are very intellectual words, right? They're not going to say, oh my God, I can't deal with this leaking roof one more minute. I don't care what it costs, just fix it. They should say that because that probably more effectively represents the truth. But they're never going to say that. They're never going to tell you necessarily what upsets them. So they come to you, maybe they've talked to 20 other people. At this point in time, we don't know. All we know is that we're talking to them. And on the surface, what they're saying seems like it makes sense, right? They're saying all the things that you as a salesperson want to hear, right? Company calls you that you've been trying to do business with for years. And they say, you know, our existing supplier has been letting us down, and it's had, you know, terrible quality, and we need to move our business. Now, you as a salesperson, you get all excited because that's exactly what you want to hear, right? What better could you hear that they're unhappy with the person that they have? Now, a professional salesperson is not going to take that bait. I'm going to say, really? Well, what happened? Well, the last couple of shipments haven't been accurate. Okay. Well, has that been a problem before? Well, no, it's just been in these last couple weeks. Okay. Well, did you call and tell them you were unhappy with the shipments? You were upset about what's going on? Well, yeah, we did. And what did they say? Well, they said Bob in shipping is on vacation. His wife just had a baby. Now think about that. How many times do we as salespeople get excited for something that doesn't even have any value in the excitement? Right? Somebody calls and says, yeah, we're interested in doing a blah, blah, blah. Well, how many times have you been a consumer and you called somebody knowing you didn't have the money, you didn't have the time, you didn't have whatever you needed to complete the order, but you had no qualms or trepidations about calling them, asking them for something? If you have an incumbent situation, again, there could be a consistent incumbent, somebody that they works with all the time. It could be an inconsistent incumbent. They work with them one time and potentially will never work with them again. But I need to be able to bring them over to me, that nobody's perfect, right? It's an understanding that all of these things are taking place. I want to know what's going to happen. I wish I was a mind reader, right? I wish I was that psychic that we talked about having in the back room that knew exactly when you needed me. But there is a way that I can mind read and make it a little bit easier. Okay? It's called let's pretend. So I would like you to write that down. Let's pretend. Let's pretend is the mechanism that I use to drag the future into the present. And this is what it sounds like. So Mrs. Jones calls me. They want me to come out. Blah, 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 blah. Here's the reason. We talked about the compelling reason. We talked about money. We talked about decision makers. We had that really cursory conversation that moves them from that prospect into the qualified prospect, which generates the opportunity and legitimacy for me actually visiting them. And I said, so Mrs. Jones, what would you like to get at the end of our time together, right? I want to know what it is that you want to accomplish. Now, I'm not saying we can. I'm just saying I would like to know what you would like to accomplish at the end of whatever the end of is. And Mrs. Jones is going to say, well, at the end of this, I want to do blah-bitty, 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 and get a price and get a proposal and details and scope of work and everything like that. And I'm going to say why. As again, we're looking at that softening statement. Mrs. Jones, I'd be happy to. I'd be happy to. But can I ask you a question? Mrs. Jones, let's pretend that you and I meet. I get all of your information. I go back to my office. I put my quote together, right? It has all the details, all the pricing, it has all that, right? I sit down with you and your husband. I present my quotation. I present my proposal to you. Let's pretend, what happens next? And shut up. What happens next? Now, what could she say? Well, she said, well, we could put your quote together with the 5 other ones we have. Okay, well, when do you want to know that? We could, we could wait and try to get my house refinanced, right? Get an equity loan on the house. Well, when do you want to know that they don't have the money right now? We have to wait. Aunt Molly is on life support in the hospital, and I'm going to get her money when she dies. Well, again, when do you want to know that? Let's pretend is the mechanism that pulls the future into today. So when I do something, what will you do? Now, could they lie to you? Of course they could. Of course they could. But most people at this point generally don't. It's much the same way as if you were an attorney. You would never ask a question of your client on the stand unless you knew exactly what they were going to say, because you wouldn't want something out of the blue to destroy the structure of your case. You would never ask that question unless you knew what they were going to say. Much the same way in business is that I'm not going to do something unless I know what you're going to do next. It's like playing a game of chess. If I do this, you're likely going to do this. And if you do that, which is what you're likely to do, well, then I'm going to be able to do this. It's that idea of having these three different moving parts. And that's why, again, successful sales is not random. It's not haphazard. It is very tactical, very strategic. The illustration that I use is anyone who's taken martial arts. Most martial arts, I took Aikido. Most martial arts is built around a series of moves. Boxing is the same way, right? Chess is the same way. Most games of strategy and chance. Golf is the same way, right? You pick up a certain club, which is going to put you to a certain place on the golf course, knowing that when you get there, you're going to use another club that will get you to another place on the golf course, and then you're going to pick the final club, which is a putter, which is on a par 3 what you're going to use to ultimately put the ball in the hole, if you're successful enough with the first two. Most successful relationships are like that. They're built in a series of patterns. When one happens, two happens. When A happens, B happens. So when I say, let's pretend, I go back to my, and again, tell her exactly what's going to happen. I'm going to go back to my office. I'm going to sit down with your measurements. I'm going to sit down with my notes. We're going to put our proposal together. We're going to work out the pricing. We're going to identify the materials and the scope of work and everything. I'm going to set up a time for you and your husband and I to meet. I'm going to go ahead and present my proposal. So let's pretend we did all of that. What happens next? And wait for the answer. They will tell you, because it's in their best interest at this point to tell you what their process is. Now, it's great to have choices. You can decide. If they say, well, I'm going to put, your quote with the other 5 I've got, and you know that you're never the cheapest, when do you want to bring it up? After you've invested all this time doing the quote? Or right in the beginning? Right in the beginning. Why? If I'm not going to make a sale, when do I want to find out? Right away. So if I know she's putting it with 5 other quotes, and historically I'm more expensive than most people out there, I'm going to catch her right there. Mrs. Jones, I got to tell you right up front, I don't remember the last time I won a piece of business because I was the cheapest. We're not built like that. We're not this kind of wholesale cheapest guy. We're not the Walmart of commercial painters. I'm not saying these other people are bad, but I'm saying we're not like that. We're not the Walmart of commercial painters. We're more like the Saks of commercial painters. So I don't know if what we do and potentially what we're looking at are going to be the same. Now, out of role play. But I can't leave it there. I can't just leave her with the idea that I'm more than expensive than anyone else, because I haven't justified why more expensive is in fact better for her than to go to the Walmart of painters. And I'm going to say, back in role play, but Mrs. Jones, can I ask you a question? And she always says yes. Mrs. Jones, why do you think people keep coming back to us? Year after year, right? They introduce us to their family, their friends, people at church, co-workers, neighbors. Why do you think people keep coming back to us even though we're never the cheapest? Why do you think? And shut up. Because whatever she says is what we're going to run with. Well, I guess you do good work. You're right. Well, I guess you do work on time and on budget. You're right. Well, I guess you have more experienced crews. You're right. Now, out of role play, if she says it, it must be what? It must be true. Because if I say I'm great, now I am great, by the way, but if I say it, it's the ramblings of a salesperson. But if she says I'm great, it's what? It's true. I actually had a guy one time, and I love this. Just goes to show how much fun can be. I say this to a guy, and he goes, well, they must be stupid. I just said, why do you think people keep coming back to me year after year, month after month, even though I'm not the cheapest? And this is what the guy says. They must be stupid. I said, you're right. All the way to the bank. all the way to the bank. Now, he wasn't prepared for that answer. He was prepared for some version of, well, I'll do it for cheaper. No, of course not. You don't reduce your price ever, ever. It's not necessary. You're an incumbent, or excuse me, you're going against an incumbent. These people are already there. You know, it's interesting. We don't necessarily talk about politics, but there are some great factual situations. Historically, on the midterm elections, after a new president comes in office, historically, the competing party generally does better in the midterm elections. Who knows why, statistically, and that's just been the way that it has been. So we can look at certain evidences, we can look at certain statistics and certain reoccurring facts that we know to be true. Another issue that we talk about is the idea of giving them a demo or a try, right? There's nothing better. I work with a lot of car dealerships. And the first thing we teach the car dealerships is get the people in the cars. Get the people in the cars. There is nothing better than to getting them in the cars. And why is it important to get them in the cars? Well, because they're going to get into this car and they're going to judge it against what? The last car they got out of. That had no air conditioning, that had a terrible radio, that was dirty, it smelled bad. And now you're going to put them into that car, and for that moment, they now see themselves in that car, because they physically are, but now they see that car in their garage. When they get in that car, that demo, that ability to take a drive, and you'll hear all the things that the good dealer guy says, right? The good salespeople. What do you think? Drives great, doesn't it? Smells great, doesn't it? They see me with long hair. What's the first thing they're going to talk about? It was interesting. We bought our last fleet cars. And I went in just like this. You know what the first thing the guy said? What kind of music you like? What kind of music do you like? Didn't take long. So what do you think he did? We went to the Sirius radio. And by the way, we were actually in the dealership. We were actually just in the parking lot of the dealership. You know what? We didn't talk about going four-wheeling. We didn't talk about off-road, even though it's an off-road vehicle. We didn't talk about towing capacity. We didn't talk about any of that stuff. You know why? Because I don't care about any of that stuff. So he went to the Sirius radio, and he was smart enough to know how to get to the Ozzy Osbourne station in Sirius radio. And for the first 5 minutes of me sitting in that car, you know, we talked about the radio. The radio. And he says, you know, what else is important to you? I says, well, Mrs. Zavis likes this. And we talked about this. You know what he said the third thing was? What else does Mrs. Zavis like? Now keep in mind, we're buying fleet cars. Only one of them are here. 3 of them are back in Michigan. He says, what else does Mrs. Zavis like? Because he was smart enough to realize that this car, to me, is just a car. The part of this car that was important to me is the radio. It was the radio that was important to me. I'm never going to go off-road. I'm never going to four-wheel, right? I'm never going to pull a boat or a camper. I'm never going to do any of those things. For me, it was the radio. So the idea of a demo, some simple way for them to understand how whatever it is that you do will enrich their lives, right? Sometimes maybe, you know, I work a lot with timeshare companies. And one of the things that timeshare companies love to do, they say, well, why don't you come as our guest? Come for a night or two as our guest. That's it. Just come as our guest. Try it out. If you like it, great. If you don't, you don't. The only thing that we ask is once your stay is ended, give us an opportunity to sit down for a half hour, 45 minutes, and answer any questions you have. That's it. Because what do they know? After you've had this beautiful timeshare room in Disney World, and the kids are so happy, and the pool's great, and everything's great, and the restaurants are great, and everything's wonderful, you can't possibly, your wife is never going to let you go back to the Motel 6. Never. It's just not going to happen. The idea of a demo. Now, I understand there's some businesses that can't do that. There's certain things you can't demo. I get that. But there are things that you can do that will help them see what a smaller version looks like. So some people do it as a demo. Some people do it as kind of like a complimentary gift for them to try out. In the case of a timeshare, it might be a complimentary night. In the case of a car dealership, it might be a test drive. We all have a version of that we do that kind of communicates to a potential prospect, this is what I do, and this is an opportunity for you to see it in action. Now, one of the things that we talk about is the idea of a monkey's paw. Now, conceptually, some people get it, some people don't. But I love to be able to talk about this because it's such an amazing illustration that I think it transcends everybody and everybody comes to the same conclusion. So the concept of a monkey's paw is built around 13th and 14th century seamanship. So I'm sure you're all up to date on your 13th and 14th century seamanship. But for the one or two of you out there that are not, at that time there was no motors in any kind of boats. Everything was done by sails. You were at the mercy of the wind. If the wind is pushing that way, you're going that way. If the wind is pushing this way, you're going that way. The problem being is if the wind is pushing this way and you really want to go that way, what are you going to do? And they learned different techniques how to tack into the wind and certain things to do to try to make any and all of these things a little bit more effectual. But the real problem was the docking. Because a docking in these 13th century giant wooden vessels, keep in mind, when you put a piece of wood in water, it absorbs the water. It continues to float, but it also swells. So when you've got these big giant wooden sailing vessels and they're coming up to the dock, it's really more of a controlled crash than anything else, right? You don't have a motor. You're at the will of the wind. So what they would try to do is kind of get kind of close, not exactly, but kind of close, so they didn't smash into the dock. And what they would do is they would throw out a rope to the people that were on the dock, and you'd grab the rope, and then you pull the ship in a little bit more controlled into the dock, and then you would tie it up, and there it would rest safely. The problem being is that at that time, there were no synthetic materials. There was no nylons or rayons. You basically had hemp. And anyone who knows anything about hemp, if you get hemp wet, it swells to 10 times its size and weight. So now you have this dry piece of hemp rope that is very heavy to start with, not even wet, and you're going to chuck this thing over the side of the boat through some yet-to-be undetermined distance from the boat to the shore, but it's not going to be close. And you're going to hope that the guys on the shore are smart enough and fast enough that when you chuck this giant rope to the shore, they're going to be able to grab it. Do you see a lot of moving parts here? Do you see a lot of probability for error? Because when that hemp hits the water, not only do you got to drag that heavy sucker back up, and now you've got the wind that's still pushing the boat in every different direction possible, but now you've got to throw this heavy sucker again over the side of the boat, onto the dock, hopefully, where the dock guys, hopefully, can grab it again. Well, they realized very early on that's a stupid way to do it, and it's virtually impossible. So they came up with the idea of a monkey's paw. So instead of throwing something from the boat to the dock, what if we threw something from the dock to the boat? And it didn't have to be that giant tether line. It can just be a little smaller line. But it needed to have something on the end of it so when they threw it, it would follow that direction, right? Whatever that would follow that arc. You couldn't just take a rope. You ever try to throw a rope? Right? It's really not going to go anywhere. And someone commented that the little knot that they put on the end of this smaller rope looked like a monkey's paw. It looked like the fist. It really does, actually. And then they would throw this smaller rope, which is much easier to throw, onto the boat. They would tie that onto the bigger line, and then they would pull that over the top of the water, and then they would secure it to the dock and then safely bring the ship in. So I'm going a long way to make a point. But the idea of a monkey's paw became synonymous with some version of a tryout, right? Some version of a demo, some version of an opportunity to see if this works for you. Now, if you don't have this, I'm going to strongly encourage you to do it. You want to have something. So, for example, maybe you have a special construction technique, right? I work with some waterproofing companies. And one of the things they love to do is they love to go to somebody's house and they will take something and they will put waterproofing on it, actually on whatever it is. They'll put something on it. And then they'll submerge that thing in water. And they'll leave it there, right? It's a giveaway, so it's no big deal. So they're going to take something they bring with them. Something that would normally, maybe a little piece of wood, right? If you got wood chips outside, that's one of the things they love to do because that's your wood chip, right? They didn't even plant it with their own special wood chip. No, this is your wood chip. They're going to take your wood chip, they're going to coat it in their waterproofing material. They're going to take a cup of water, they're going to sink this thing to the bottom of the water. And they're going to say, crack this thing open in a couple days. And you crack it open in a couple days and your wood chip is as dry as the day that you picked it up. That's a demo. Now they can't actually do their waterproofing, right, which would be the best demo, right? They can't, you can't test drive their water. They can't give you a free night with their waterproofing. But every company needs to have a version of this monkey's paw or a version of this demo. Because I do believe that consumers, especially nowadays, because people are so barraged with bogus assertions, right? So barraged with bogus assertions, and we see it all the time. You see it with the local furniture company, right? You open the Sunday paper, and every day it's the most amazing furniture sale ever in the history of mankind, right? This Sunday it's going to be the sale to end all sales, and next Sunday it's going to be the sales of the century, and then after that it's going to be, you know, the sale for all time, and then it's going to be the pre-Memorial Day sale, and it'll be the Memorial Day sale, and it'll be the after Memorial Day sale, right? People are barraged with so many bogus assertions, now they don't believe anything. Even if it's true, they don't believe it. Even when they say, don't smoke. Even when they say, don't drink, don't do drugs, exercise more, they don't even believe that. Because they are so inundated with bogus assertions. So when you say that you provide the best products, when you say you provide the best pricing, when you say we provide the best service, it's another bogus assertion, right? If you have 10 people in the same industry, each saying we provide the best service, what are 9 of them doing? Lying. Because the reality is only one could legitimately provide the best service, right? If you have 9 people doing the exact same thing, only one can actually, in fact, be the better of all 10 of them based on whatever quality you want. Whatever quality you want. Only one can be the best. If you took your brochure, you crossed your name off of it, you could probably write the name of your biggest competitor and they're saying the exact same thing. Well, if you say the same thing that everybody else says, and they're saying the same thing you're saying, we have great prices, we have great service, we have great installation, we use great materials. Well, if you're all saying the same thing, then they might as well go to the cheapest person, right? If you think about it, you're all saying the same thing. We all have great, 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 great. Well, if you all say the same thing, then in fact, they might as well go to the cheapest person, right? Why not? Doesn't make any sense to pay more if in fact you're all doing the same. So you can see the subtleties in an incumbent relationship. Your goal is to create that level of dissatisfaction. What is different between you and everyone else? And most people don't really play that up. They have wonderful differences, and yet their goal is to be like everyone else. They don't want to profess themselves to being different, because if they profess themselves to being different, the perception is people won't like us. There's a section of the marketplace that won't like us. If we can't be everything to everybody, well, then there's a percentage of the marketplace that's not going to like us. Well, the reality is there's a percentage of the marketplace that's not going to like you anyways. You might as well have a target market that in fact is responded. The word that we use is speak to their listening. You want to be able to communicate a very direct, targeted message to a particular group of people that is going to listen to that message. Let's keep going on. I also love the idea that I believe that most people in sales want to do a good job. I believe that. I believe that most people in sales really do want to do a good job. I believe that most people in business in general, their goal is to do a good job. And what I find is that it's never an issue that they don't want to do it. It's an issue where they just don't know what to do. So the differentiation is not with desire. I believe the differentiation is with capacity. And here's the illustration that I use to verify that. I always like to bring evidence. Whenever I make an assertion, I always want to have some irrefutable evidence that goes along with it. Now, I've been doing this professionally since 2005. Prior to that, I used to buy and sell companies, of which I bought and sold 23 of them. And the interesting thing I found in my entire career now, I have never been involved with a sales group, a sales organization, a sales force, when they're performing poorly, has ever said these words: well, I guess we have to turn it on now. I've never heard that. I've never heard that. They've never been sandbagging. I've never seen a situation where they're like, oh, you know what, we're really doing a half-assed effort, but okay, I guess now we got to get serious. I've never heard that. What I hear is we're working as hard as we can. I believe it's not a matter of desire. It's a matter of capacity. Because if you knew how to do it, you'd already be doing it. So let me say that again. I believe with the relationships that you have, it's not a matter of desire. I believe that every relationship that you have wants to do as good of a job as they can to make you satisfied. So it's not an issue of desire, it's an issue of capacity. They don't have the capacity to make you happy. They want to, but they don't have the capacity to do it. So let me make a statement. So say, for example, you are that financial planner. And as a financial planner, you want more than anything to what? Have your clients make money, right? I think we all understand that. You go into that financial planner with the idea, I want to make more money. I don't want to minimize the money I lose, right? I'm not saying you're going to help me lose less. Nobody ever gets involved in that situation. We all start with the, I want you to help me make more. So if I don't make more as a result of our relationship, it's not an issue of desire. Why? Because more than anything, you want to help me make more money. It's an issue of capacity. You don't know how to help me make more money. Now, I'm going to say that again and slowly. You don't know how to do whatever it is that I would like you to do. Why? Because I've already determined that more than anything, you want to do that. You want me to do that, right? Every time you hire a financial planner, your goal is to make sure that that person makes you more money, right? More than anything, right, the financial planner wants to make you more money. So if you lose money, it's not an issue of desire. It's not an issue that he doesn't want you to make more. He doesn't know how to help you make more. Why? Because there are people out there, despite a terrible economy, that we're still making money, right? We're still making money, right? If gas goes up to $5, what are most people going to be investing in? Probably stocks that are connected to fuel. Why? Because that's where the money's going. We know that it's going to be more. So when you're dealing with an incumbent situation, if they knew how to fill in the blank, they would be. Because it's not an issue of desire more than anything. They want to do whatever it is that you want them to do. They want you to be satisfied. If you're not satisfied, it's not an issue of desire. It's an issue of what? Capacity. They don't know how to do whatever it is that you want to do. So if you have a remodeling problem, and your person can't fix it, and more than anything they want to fix it, is it an issue of desire? No, more than anything they want to make you happy. They just don't know how to fix it. It's an issue of capacity. So when I'm talking to someone, and they say, well, we already work with a sales trainer. And I would say, oh, okay, great. Have you doubled, tripled your business, anything like that? Well, no. Okay. When you hired them, was that the plan? Oh, yeah. Okay. Now think about that, going back to what I just said. So it's not an issue that he didn't want to help you double your business. If you don't double your business, it's not an issue of desire. More than anything, they want you to double your business. It's an issue of capacity. They don't know how, as illustrated by the fact that you haven't doubled your business. They haven't fixed your leak. They haven't dealt with your stomach pains. They haven't fixed your car. They haven't, whatever it is. In an incumbent relationship, if they are dissatisfied with the incumbent, it is not an issue of the incumbent's desire to make them satisfied. It's an issue of the incumbent's inability, the lack of capacity to know how to fix it. And it's important you as a salesperson understand that, because that's the wedge that's going to open the door for you. Again, I didn't say that I was going to do anything. What I said is, when you hired these people, what did you expect? And it's likely that when you hired them, that's what they wanted to give you, unless they were complete and total shysters that were wanting to steal from you right in the beginning. But I believe that the desire was there, that they wanted to satisfy your needs. If your needs aren't satisfied, again, it's not a lack of desire on their part, it's a lack of capacity on their part. They don't know how. And that leaves us the opening for us to move in. Now, whatever that know-how is, maybe they had something fixed that was damaged. Maybe they wanted to make more money in the stock market. Maybe they wanted to sell their house for a higher price or buy a house for a lower price. If these people could do it, they would. I believe if they could do it, they would. Now, in sales training and coaching, we train to what's called the absurd. Training to the absurd, it takes out that black and white, because a lot of this isn't black and white. Training to the absurd basically says, if I go and I give you an illustration that's so far in one direction, then because we know where the end point is on one side, we can plot the end point on this side. That's training to the absurd. Because most things aren't black and white. Most things in life are a shade of gray, right? Your mom said there's two sides to every story. Most life is not black and white, it's shades of gray. But you can't train to the shades of gray because it's too nebulous. There's nothing concrete about it. So I tell people, when we're talking about an incumbent relationship, when we're talking about the continuation, and again, since these people are an incumbent, they already inhabit the place where we would ultimately like to be. Why? Because they're the incumbent. They're already in that place that we would ultimately like to be. So I'm going to tell these people, so Mrs. Jones, let me share with you, because you mentioned a couple things about XYZ company. And there's a great phraseology that I love to say because it is so good and it transcends everybody. If you always do what you've always done, you will always get what you've always gotten. So I'll say that again. If you always do what you've always done, you will always get what you've always gotten. So that means is that if you just keep doing the same thing, you're likely going to get the same results over and over again. So if you have a relationship with a financial planner that isn't giving you good returns and isn't minimizing your tax advantages and isn't minimizing your loss, there's a good chance that if you don't make any change, you're just going to have more of that. If you deal with contractors that aren't ethical and don't use good materials and are always the cheapest guys on the block, there's a good chance that you're going to continue to have shoddy jobs. If you're working, if your IT guy isn't a professional, he's your neighbor's kid, 14-year-old neighbor's kid, and you wonder why you're having problems with your computer. It's all about change. What are you willing to change? Because I find rarely does the application of nothing ever result in any kind of change. So if you always do what you've always done, you will always get what you've always gotten. And that transcends everything. That's every aspect of your life, from how you deal with your spouse to how you deal with your kids, your neighbors, your friends, your siblings, your coworkers, your prospects, your employees. Again, we live in a world of change. The only constant in the universe is change. There is no staying the same. You're either expanding or you're contracting, but it's always change. Now, you have the opportunity. That's why earlier I said having choices is great. You can either act or be acted upon. And it's been my experience the times when I was acted upon didn't come out very well for me because I had no influence in the process. It just kind of happened upon me, and unfortunately, I was the unwitting recipient of whatever the outcome is. So understanding you're dealing with incumbents. So let's go full circle why this was important for today's session. I had said earlier today that you're likely going to have to do twice as much to still potentially get the same results you were getting prior to the COVID-19 pandemic. And there's a whole lot of reasons why. Gas prices and war in Ukraine and blah, 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 all heaped upon each other. So what that means is if you're going to have to do more than you did before, your skills of how to bring people to you out of these new people that you're going to be reaching out to need to be elevated as well. You're going to be talking to more people. Of these more people, they would likely be talking, these more people are also talking to more people. So maybe instead of getting one quote or two quotes, they get 5. Instead of being willing to spend $10,000, now they only want to spend 5. The influence of these incumbents is enormous. And understanding not only the influences of the consistent incumbents, the people that they're going to all the time, right? The auto shop that always repairs their cars, the gas station they go to, the car wash they go to, the dentist they go to, their favorite restaurant, the church they go to. All of these things are the consistent incumbents. The inconsistent incumbents, the ones they go to every so often. They take a vacation. Last 3 vacations they took to Disney World. That's considered an inconsistent incumbent because it could happen, but it could not. You have to understand how to unseat these incumbents because as your influence goes up, as you're contacting these twice as many people, you want to be able to unseat the incumbent. And again, keeping in mind what? The incumbent might be nothing. Again, the incumbent might be nothing. So if you've had a person that's never invested in a personal trainer, right? Somebody who's health conscious. They've never invested in a personal trainer. They go to the gym, they work out, they run, they do this, they do this, they do this. But they've never invested in a personal trainer, right? Therefore, the incumbent is no one, right? Not having an incumbent is the incumbent. How is that person who's had a whole life successfully of health and wellness and working out and running and gyms and all that stuff, how do you break through the idea that it makes sense to pay this person $100 an hour when they've been surviving quite nicely without them for a period of time? Understand the incumbent is there. It could be no one, but it could be there. So I want to take this opportunity as we close up today's session to again, and I know that I say this and John and I both feel this from the depth of our hearts, it is a privilege to do what we do for you every week. It really is. And I understand that there's so many influences in your world today that are vying for your time, certainly online influences. So if you're joining us on YouTube Live or you're joining us on Facebook Live or you're joining us on our Zoom Live, it's a privilege to do this. If you're ultimately watching this on Vimeo sometime in the future, again, it's an absolute privilege to do this for you. And I believe that the commitment that you're making to your sales education will come back to you many times over. So thank you so much for joining us today. I'm Don Zavis, National Sales Trainer and Sales Coach, and I truly, truly from the bottom of my heart wish you good selling. Thank you, everybody. Bye-bye. Yes, yes, yes. Hello, gentlemen.